I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
This evening, I will be joining Jimmy Dore, Dr. Cornell West, Kyle Kalinske, Justin Jackson, and Brianna Joy Gray, among others, in a Force the Vote town hall to discuss forcing a vote on Medicare for All. As Brianna notes in Current Affairs, progressives in the House could garner support from the Progressive Caucus and hold Pelosi's speakership hostage unless she agrees to bring Medicare for All to the floor, where it can be publicly debated. Former National Press Secretary for the Sanders campaign, contributing editor at Current Affairs, host of the Bad Faith podcast, if I can say it properly, the great one and only Brianna Joy Gray joins me now to talk about this idea and where we are in the fight, because there have been several evolutions and iterations here. But I think it's important to kind of go back to the basics, because to me there are two main pieces here. Number one is, are progressives going to use the power that they actually and leverage that they actually have in the House? And this is the first major test. And then the other piece is, why Medicare for All and why now? So let's take each of those in turn, Brianna, if you would.
Yeah, what's so interesting about this particular debate is this is one of the few moments in recent history where we're not talking about hypothetical power on the left. We're talking about real, actual power. This isn't a question of how many people can we convince to get on board with this. Right now, today, a very small number of progressives have the power to choose to not vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. And in doing so, make it so that Nancy Pelosi, a woman who has been really held up by the left as an obstacle to a lot of the substantive goals, policy goals that it has, can be no longer in that position of power, right? Or we can say that we will vote for her for Speaker under certain conditions. Principally that she bring Medicare for All to a floor vote so that we can have a lengthy discussion in the middle of a global pandemic about the failures of our employer-based healthcare system, in addition to a number of other concessions that people like David Sirota have set out, like getting rid of Richie Neal as the head of the Ways and Means Committee and other substantive barriers to advancing a progressive agenda.
Okay. A little blast from the past there. Welcome to Sabby's podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby's podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. So we're going to get into it today. There's a reason why I played that clip, because we are going to do a deep dive case study into the progressive campaign strategy. So you're going to see a little bit of old and a little bit of new. And I'm going to explain to you why this is not working. And in order to do that, we have to go back and look a little bit at the past. And we're going to look at the present. And then I'm going to explain to you why some are continuing to do this. And I think this is something that you really need to hear. If you don't listen to anything else that I ever say, this particular segment is going to be incredibly important, because I'm going to break this down for you today. So I want to go ahead and give a quick shout out to Sabby patrons. Right. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for your support. You guys are always doing the thing here. Shout out to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. I also want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Amala and Janet Lusano. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. We have some revealing moments today. We're going to break down a couple of things. So I'm only doing 2 stories today because that case study is going to take most of the time, to be honest with you. But let's take a look at this thumbnail because this is incredibly important, or at least I think so. So today we're going to discuss the progressive campaign strategy, and we're going to do a little bit of a case study. Now, if you look at this thumbnail, notice you'll see Kyle, Crystal, Bernie, Marianne, and then you'll see a split. And you'll see Jimmy Dore on the other side of that split. I'm going to break that down. And we're also going to discuss Khanna Pleads for Silicon Valley Bank bailout. Notice you see him there. You see the SVB logo. And you also see a picture of the map of Ukraine because they are also connected to this. So there's a lot that goes into this. And I'm going to break that down for you today. Yes, we have a lot to discuss. We have a lot to discuss. Going to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? Fred says, hi, Sabby. We are unable to travel more than a few blocks because of the worst flooding in California history. And Khanna is worried about a California bank. Wow. Yes, but there's a reason why he's worried about that. Oh, I have so much to show you today. So much to show you. Shout out to CBC Voter says, keep your drive, Sabby Sabs. Thank you so much. What's going on, Negro 489? No corporate welfare. They should pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. I like that idea. What's going on? Hannah G says, Con Man is back. Shout out to Violin. Glance in the Abyss. New poem published on Violin Substack. Please leave a comment if you can, and thank you. What's going on? Edward says Khanna wants to bail out the California bank because he received donations from them. However, why not bail out the poor/working class? Yet they look to the taxpayers to pay it. Get Bezos or Gates to do it. There's more than that, Edward. There's even more than that besides the donations. Shout out to Sean, who's a Sabby member, says, you're. Greetings, old man, says, hey, buddies. Shout out to Dana, says, doobie doobie doo. What's going on? Eric Red, who's a Sabby member, says, hey there, Sunday friends. Greetings, crazy boy. Oi, folks. Shout out to Zach, says, I'm in love with the intro, the piano music, and so forth. So therapeutic. Thank you. Other people have told me that as well. Can't take credit for it, go. Jesse Jett actually made that song. Shout out to Big Mr. Firebird. All the best from the UK. What's up? Greetings, Casey sends solidarity and fire. Shout out to BHF, also sending solidarity. Greetings, Mastermind says, hello, fam. Shout out to Nicholas says, the good old days. LOL. Yeah. Yeah, the good old days. What's going on? Carrie Scott says, MH. Shout out to Notori says, honey, crystal ball was always trash. Oh, damn, Notori. Damn, Notori is coming in with fire today. Shout out to Silver Surfer says, peace, love. And there's a Star Trek symbol there. What's up? What is going on? Make sure I don't skip this because this jumps sometimes. Shout out to Mary Ebony Collins, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, Sabby Sab from Wisconsin. What's going on? Shout out to Deneen, says, Sabby Sunday. Greetings, Steven, says, Sabby, happy Sunday, everyone. I hope all is well. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with this story about Khanna and the Silicon Valley Bank. Now, for those who are not aware, I touched on this a little bit Friday when Phil was here, and he was actually one of the volunteers that's advocating for a public bank in Philadelphia. We touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to break down more of this story today because there's so much that goes into this. So I want to get started here with this clip from NBC discussing Silicon
Alarm outside headquarters
Bank.
of
Silicon Valley Bank, which is the second largest bank collapse since 2008. But what actually happened here, and how is Ro Khanna connected? Let's dive right in.
Alarm outside headquarters of Silicon Valley Bank in Santa Clara, California today.
They just came out and told us that the bank is shut down.
SVB, the 16th largest bank in the U.S. with $175 billion in deposits, is now the biggest American bank to fail since the 2008 financial crisis. Its customers are primarily businesses and investors in the tech sector.
The root cause of the failure here was a sudden and significant increase in interest rates, which, that part of the job of a bank is to manage interest rate risk, and that didn't happen here.
Earlier this week, SVB disclosed it took a loss on the sale of bonds due to rising interest rates and announced it would sell shares to shore up its balance sheet. Its stock price plunged and customers rushed to take their money out. The FDIC now stepping in, telling customers they will be able to access funds by Monday, but the guaranteed amount per depositor, $250,000.
A heart-stopping moment of this bank is done.
Ashley Trenier is the CEO of healthcare startup Farmbox RX. Unable to access her money today, she fears she could be out more than $10 million.
$250,000 isn't a ton of money to us when you're talking of 8 figures that's in the bank currently.
Let's just comment here for just a second. Imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and you went to the bank and you said, you know what, I'm going to go to the ATM and take out some cash. And you get there and you were told that you cannot access your funds. Imagine if that happened to you. That is what's happening to people that were connected to SVB. They're having to deal with that. They can't even take out the money. But you have money there that you cannot withdraw. Imagine if that happened to you. What would you do? My dad always told me it's a good idea to have cash on hand. He told me this because I'm not one to carry cash. But it is a good idea. It is a good idea to have cash stashed away in whatever place you consider to be safe, so that in the event you cannot access your account, you still have a way to get cash in hand. But this should have never happened. And it's giving me '08 vibes, all over again. And there are people saying, well, it's not like this is going to spread. We don't know that. We heard that back in '08, remember? When they said, oh, it's just one bank here, one bank there, no biggie. And then there was a huge collapse. And the government, which was under the Obama administration at that time, had to make a decision. And that decision was, do we bail out Wall Street and the banks, or do we bail out the American people that just lost their homes? Barack Obama chose not only to bail out Wall Street, but he also chose not to help those individuals that lost their homes. Those homes were foreclosed, and companies like BlackRock stepped in to purchase those foreclosed properties, renovated those properties, and made a lot of money off of it. And more Americans were homeless on the street because of it. Let's go on.
Concern over today's collapse of SVB drove Wall Street lower. The banking sector alone down more than 4%. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen.
There are recent developments that concern a few banks that I'm monitoring very carefully.
The immediate concern? The cash-burning startups who have millions in SVB and may not be able to access the money they need to pay bills or make payroll.
Deirdre, given what happened today, how much concern is there about the banking sector overall?
So they even have concerns in reference to making payroll. So you have to remember, this bank in particular is heavily connected to the tech industry, startups in that Silicon Valley area. Now that can include Google, Facebook, all these other startups that a lot of us probably haven't even heard of unless we live out that way. So it's not just the fact that people cannot go to the bank to withdraw money. It's also the fact that they may not even be able to pay their employees, which could lead to more layoffs. I have to remind you that some of these tech companies have already laid off thousands of workers just over a month ago. So this is a huge, huge deal.
Lester, at this point, the issue seems contained to this one bank. SVB was so heavily focused on these startup tech companies that its business model put it in a risky position that the major banks don't face in the same way. Lester?
Deirdre Boza tonight. Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks for watching our.
So now there's more that goes into this. Khanna actually not only tweeted about this, of course, as Khanna would do, but Khanna also had an interview on Meet the Press to talk about this very issue. And it was really interesting to me because I noticed that out of all the politicians, Khanna seemed to be heavily focused on this particular bank. Now, I'm going to show you that discussion on Meet the Press in just a second, but I want to explain to you what it was like for some of the customers to scramble to take their money out of that bank. And not only that, you also have to keep in mind that the CEO made sure to get all of his money out before the collapse happened. Let's go on. Let's get into it.
When did you find out something was wrong?
So my co-founder, Audrey Wu, and I received an email from one of our seed investors. The email seemed cryptic. It was strange. It was urgent.
Let me correct and say she. Sorry, I think I said he. This is the CEO. This is Ruth Health, CEO. And she also has money in Silicon Valley Bank. Let's go on.
It was not like the other emails he sends. And we were in meetings, we run a busy maternal health startup. We have so many concerns every day that this email just didn't make sense. So a few hours later, I called the investor and I said, hey, what was this email about? He was out of breath, like he had just run a marathon. And he said, take your money out of SVB, go into your account, take your money out as soon as possible. And, as a business owner, my co-founder, Audrey, and I constantly think about two things. We think about our team, the people we employ and their families, and we think about our patients.
And I want to know, for the other customers of SVB, were they given that warning at that same time as well? Take your money out? Or was that information only given to the CEOs? Apparently, it wasn't given to the other customers because, like I said, they told you they couldn't take their money out. They couldn't withdraw money. So why is it okay for the CEO to have that warning and to get their money out, but not for everybody else who's banking there?
The mothers, the new moms, and the families that we support and their families. And so for us, it was do this now or else.
Okay, and this was what, yesterday or the day before?
This was yesterday between the hours of noon and 3 p.m.
Okay, yesterday between the hours of noon and 3 p.m. you get this. So then you do it. You go and and how does that happen? They actually give you the money? I mean, these are the 3 hours before the world fell apart. So what happened then?
Well, we were incredibly lucky to have that news early from an investor. We didn't withdraw the money immediately. We're conscientious business owners. We spoke to a few other investors. We spoke to friends. I mean,
they had that warning from an investor. You see how it works for the people who are on the inside? I don't even know if I believe this woman. I don't know if I trust what she's saying when she goes, we didn't withdraw the money immediately. We're conscientious business owners. Do you buy that?
This is like calls going off the hook for the last 36 hours. When we felt confident that this was going to be a crisis, Audrey acted fast. And this is the kind of fear that actually incites focus. We withdrew the money through transfers and wires as soon as possible. I mean, she was withdrawing small amounts, big amounts, just to not set off an AI that might limit our withdrawals.
So they knew how to play this game. So let me explain what she's talking about here about how they withdrew the money. So if you go to the bank and let's say you withdraw like $15,000 and then you come back 30 minutes later and withdraw another $15,000, the bank is most likely going to flag that as unusual activity. It may block your card. It may lock your account to the point where you can't withdraw the rest of that money because obviously they have these systems in place where they're like, well, wait a minute, this person doesn't usually make this type of withdrawal for this amount and repeatedly throughout the day. So they knew that because they're a part of the system. So they knew to actually go there and to withdraw small amounts and then maybe a large amount so that it doesn't get that flag, so that their account is not locked and they can get the rest of that money out. The problem is a lot of people in this country, I would say the average American, does not realize that. And sometimes they don't find out until they get that flag. There was a time I deposited a check. I'll never forget this. I deposited a check one time, and it took a whole week to clear my account because of the amount of the check. Now, this was when I was in grad school. This was the leftover money from my student loans. This was the money that I was going to use to get my books and et cetera, other things that I needed for my course. But it took a whole week for the bank to clear that check because it wasn't used to me getting that amount of money. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that the people on the inside, they knew how to work the system so that they would protect themselves and they would make sure they got their money out. Everybody else is screwed over. And this is a problem. This is a big problem with the system. Let's go on.
And we were able to remove, this was not our only bank account, but we were able to remove the majority of the funds so that what was left when the website crashed was below the $250,000 FDIC.
Right. So you have money there. And I know and the FDIC, in terms of, because the amount, I mean, obviously you had a lot more than that there. You were able to get that out. The amount that you have that's insured now by the FDIC, the $250,000, your understanding is you're going to get that pretty much right away.
What we're hearing is by Monday.
Okay.
So there you go. That's the $250,000 that was referenced in the previous clip. But I do not trust these people. I don't believe what they're saying. I think these people are extremely nervous right now. And I think they're trying to do whatever they can to cover their self. And that includes someone like Ro Khanna, because Ro Khanna, I think I said meet the press, it's Face the Nation. Ro Khanna was on Face the Nation talking about this very issue. And there's a couple of things I want to point out here, because you need to ask yourself, why is Ro Khanna, I don't see any other politicians commenting on this as heavily as he is. Why is Ro Khanna so heavily invested in this particular banking issue? I don't even think I've heard Joe Biden make a statement about this yet. We're going to get into that. But first, this interview here with Face the Nation.
We're joined now by Congressman Ro Khanna. He is a Democrat who represents the California district where Silicon Valley Bank was once headquartered.
Cheesing too hard
here. I wonder what you make of the Treasury Secretary's remarks. I know you've been in contact with the White House, with Treasury, and with FDIC.
I have great respect for Secretary Yellen, but I think we need to have more clarity and greater strength in what Treasury is saying. First, the principle needs to be that all depositors will be protected and have full access to their accounts Monday morning.
All depositors, meaning those with accounts bigger than $250,000, which is the cutoff for insurance right now.
Yes, all of them. There's precedent for this.
Did you hear what he just said? There's precedent for it. So again, like, if your account is not bigger than $250,000, you're not a part of that precedent. This is the point that I really want to drive home. Again, they're playing to a certain group of people.
Powell, when he was at Treasury in 1991, the Bank of New England collapsed. And Chair Powell said that Treasury coordinated with FDIC and with the Fed, and they insured every depositor then. And why did they do it? They didn't want a regional run on the banks. Here's what I'm hearing from people in my constituency. They are getting notes to pull out of regional banks, and all of this will be consolidated in the top four banks. We don't want that as a nation, especially if you're progressive. The other thing is the payroll companies that are involved. Some of them have 400,000 folks. They're not going to be able to meet payroll if they don't have access to the deposits. And then go ahead.
No, so you wanted to hear from the Treasury Secretary a statement that said the U.S. government will guarantee all depositors?
Yes, just like they did with the Bank of New England. Now, here's the thing. It's not going to cost taxpayers money, because if you look at the financials of SVB, they have the assets. They have the assets. They don't have the liquidity. What happened is they had these long-term Treasury bonds, and then the Fed hiked interest rates very, very fast. We can debate the wisdom of that, and they were. This was the cause. Those assets still have value. We need the liquidity. Now there may have been mismanagement, and we can get into that. But right now, the key thing is for the depositors to have access to those accounts.
So the Treasury Secretary also said that acquisitions are an option here. That indicates perhaps a private sector option with another bank or other banks buying up these assets and taking these on. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, and that would be the ideal situation, and our delegation that talked to the FDIC last night made that clear. But to have that happen,
Is that what FDIC is working on?
That's what we urge them to work on. They said they're working on it. But to have that happen, you need FDIC and Treasury involved because these assets are not liquid and they may pay off 10 years from now. I don't think you're going to get a private seller without the Treasury Department and FDIC being actively engaged in helping liquidity with these Treasury bonds.
And you know that.
Now, let me just chime in here for just a second. Something that he said when he mentioned the taxpayers. Well, this is not going to cost the taxpayers money. It shouldn't cost the taxpayers money regardless, because there is a thing called MMT, modern monetary theory, which tells us that the government can just print money. And Khanna knows about MMT. When I talked to Professor Kaboob, when he was on this show over a year, I think it was last year he came onto the show, I did ask him, are there politicians in DC that are aware of MMT, that know what that means? And he said, yes. He said, in fact, Khanna is one of them. So this is another thing, is like as many interviews as you see Khanna do in reference to finances, in reference to the money that the government can spend, you never hear Khanna mention MMT, and he is very much aware of it. This whole idea that the taxpayers would even be remotely involved is ludicrous because the government can just print the money. This whole idea, this goes even to the deficit ceiling. They explain this very well on Real Progressives. Even when it comes to the budget deficit, and they talk about the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling isn't even real. It doesn't even exist. This is just another excuse for them to not give us what we should have, the American people. So they can give these excuses and say, we can't give everybody Medicare for all. It's too expensive and we have to balance out the budget. But you never hear them say that when it comes to the defense budget. You never hear them make that claim. Let's go on a little bit longer here, and then I'm going to show you how Khanna is invested in this particular situation.
That's not happening.
Whether they're engaged, I think they need to be engaged. They say they're engaged, but they need to resolve this by Monday morning. And I think the way to resolve it is to say depositors will have access to the accounts. Look, the bargain in our country from FDR has always been investors, shareholders lose. I have no sympathy for the executives, no sympathy for people who have stock there. But the depositors are protected. And let's talk about who these depositors are. They're not just the payroll companies. These are climate startups. These are startups that are helping cure cancer. Yeah. These are companies in the wine industry. These are companies that are dealing with AI and defense to keep us ahead of China. 50,000 of them. And they're employing Americans across the country. And they didn't take risks. They just had their money in a bank. And we're saying those need to be guaranteed.
And are you referring to yourself too, Khanna?
Well, the president apparently spoke with the governor of California last night. Do you think the president understands the gravity of what you're laying out here? If you don't think the Treasury is speaking to this or that the Fed is addressing it?
I think they understand the gravity, but they need to take decisive action.
Because time's ticking here.
Time is ticking, and it's by Monday morning. And I would just urge them and Chair Powell to look at what he said in his own speech in 2013. And the question I'd ask Chair Powell is, if it was good enough for the Bank of New England and you understood what was going to happen with a regional run. Look, I think the U.S. banking is secure. I don't think this is a systemic risk. Here's what's going to happen. Every person in these tech companies is getting emails. Pull your money out of the regional banks, put them in the big four.
What's the problem? Is it political will? Is it concern that there will be blowback for the administration? I mean, why wouldn't there be the immediacy? Or are you indicating it's Chair Powell that you know is opposed?
No, I don't think. I think it's just that right now things move at the speed of Twitter, and the government doesn't move at that speed. And I think they don't realize what the problem could be and how fast money is moving and the challenge this could be. There is no systemic risk, but there is a risk on consolidation. And by the way, progressives should be the most concerned about this. If you don't want banking sector to be J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo.
Well, it may have to be, right?
Yeah.
Is what.
Let's comment on something here. When he talks about that the government doesn't move at that speed, the speed of Twitter. The government does move quickly when it wants to. When it's time to give more billions of dollars to Ukraine, the government moves just like that. When it is time to vote to increase the defense budget, the government moved very quickly. So the government can move quickly. It just moves quickly on the issues that it wants to move quickly on, the issues that are actually going to be profitable for military industrial complex. Of course, Ro Khanna isn't going to tell you that. Now, I want to get into this discussion here that they're talking about, like JP Morgan. I believe it was 1914. I have to look this up again. I've talked about this on the show before. But back then, JP Morgan, the actual JP Morgan, the person, he actually rescued the federal government. There was another bank collapse. And all of the banks that did collapse in New York, the ones that were still around at that point in time after this happened, you know who bought those banks? JP Morgan. JP Morgan bought those banks and then owned those banks. And that is one of the reasons why JP Morgan is as large as it is today. So some of the pushback that people have been giving is, why don't they just let one of the bigger banks like Bank of America just buy this bank, consume it, and just keep it moving? The problem is when you have those larger banks come in and they just swallow up these other banks, yes, Bank of America would get even larger than it is right now. But we all know what happens when those banks increase. They don't operate as smoothly. The customer service sucks. And Bank of America's customer service is already horrible, in my opinion. From my experiences, it's horrible. But the last thing that we want to happen is for the central banks, like the Bank of America, the JP Morgans, the last thing that we want is for these banks to get bigger. And this is why I've been pushing heavily on the show about the need for public banks. We need to pull ourselves away from the central banking system. They own too much. It's not just a place where people have accounts. It's also an industry that has been buying up property, that's been buying up real estate. They are complicit when you look at gentrification. It's not just the professionals moving into those neighborhoods that are causing it. It's also the banking industry. So we really have to break up those banks, and we need to move away from the central banking system.
What you're saying?
That's what's going to happen if the government doesn't step up here. And it's not going to cost taxpayers because the assets are there.
The assets are there. So, which is why you're...
Notice how he keeps saying it's not going to cost taxpayers. Why would it cost us? It shouldn't cost us anything at all. What did we do?
Saying government bailout is not what you're talking about, just to be clear here. You tweeted yesterday the government also needs to investigate short sales by corporate executives. That's betting a stock price is going to go down. Bloomberg also reported that the CEO of SVB Bank, Gregory Becker, sold $3.6 million of stock the day before the company collapsed.
This is the gentleman I was referring to earlier, Greg Becker, president and CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. He sold stocks the day before. Now, coincidence? I think not. I don't even know if that's legal. Like, honestly, looking back on it, that's not fair. He knew what was coming. Let's just go ahead and say it. He knew what was coming, and he was able to go ahead and sell all his stocks so that he would not have to suffer when this bank collapsed. I don't think that that's right, and I don't think that it's fair. And did he tell anybody else about that? Did he warn any of the other people that had SVB stock? Hey, go ahead and sell this. This bank is about to go under. Why did he get to have that privilege and everybody else got to watch their money just go away? This is what I mean when I say the wealthy, they make sure they look out and protect their self and protect their class. Just like the woman in the previous interview where she said, we got the alert from an investor, so we were able to go ahead and just withdraw our money just like that. Other people didn't get that opportunity. So I don't even think that should be legal, the fact that he was able to do this.
What exactly do you think occurred here?
Well, first of all, we need all the facts. I do think that money should be clawed back and used for places like Silicon Valley Community Center in my district that has money that
Clawed
they
back
can't
from
get.
the CEO, who you know.
Clawed back from the CEO, who I've known. But whether there was something nefarious or not, look, you know 10b-5s where they have to make the sale years before or month before. So I don't want people to jump to conclusions, but I do think all that money should be clawed back and given to the depositors.
Jump to conclusions. He sold his stock the day before the bank closed. I really don't think that's jumping to conclusions. I think that is very clear. He saw what was coming.
The depositors, insured or otherwise.
Insured
basically.
or otherwise.
So what do you think the big picture impact is or could be on the heart of American innovation? I mean, the tech sector is very important to American competitiveness.
It means that the companies that are looking for cures to cancer, the companies that are doing the climate work, the companies that are keeping us ahead of China on AI and defense technology, all of them are at risk. Some of them will go under.
Do you hear how he describes these tech companies? Cures for cancer, climate change. Okay. I'm pretty sure most of those tech companies and those startups are not doing that work. Why is Khanna trying to run cover for the tech industry? Remember, that's his district, right? These are his supporters. These are his donors. Again, no one else is doing this. I don't see, listen, there are other politicians in DC that are from California. I don't see them talking to Barbara Lee about this. I don't see them talking to Katie Porter about this. I don't see them talking to Nancy Pelosi about this. But Khanna was the first to rush and speak about it, not just on Face the Nation, but also on Twitter.
Some of them are going to be laying people off. It's going to mean people aren't going to be able to make their rent. And here's the point. All of the legislation we passed in Congress, the IRA to tackle climate, the CHIPS Act to bring semiconductors back, it relies on the innovation pipeline. It relies on the tech pipeline. And that is why this is such an important issue. What is hurting it is the rapid rise of interest rates, as well as now this systemic risk. And it's going to hurt the innovation pipeline, and it's going to hurt ordinary people.
And it might hurt people like him. Because this was sent my way, and shout out to the individual who sent me this because, well, we'll go to Nick's first. Let's go to Nick's tweet first, and then I'll go to the SVB stocks. You see, Nick tweeted this. Khanna wants to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank because he's on the payroll. With progressives like these, who needs neoliberals? Let's take a look at it. Again, this is FEC.gov data. This is public information. See, most Americans are not going to look this up. But here we go. If you look down here, it says Row for Congress, Inc., recipient name or ID, Khanna for Congress. This is Khanna. I wish I could zoom in, but I can't on the Twitter pictures. And then it says individual contributions. And these are the different years, 2021 to 22, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, that one's hard to see, 2010 to 2020, 2023 to 24. And it shows you here, Khanna, Row for Congress, Inc., Khanna for Congress, Silicon Valley Bank. Contributor name, Greg Becker. Greg Becker is the CEO. That was the gentleman we were just talking about. Recipient, Row for Congress, Inc. That's May 17, 2018. That's also August 13th, 2015. So those are just a few of the dates. And then we're going to get to this issue here with the stock as well. Now, this gentleman Lachlan Marquet, he has the little emoji eyes here. I love it. I love it. He points out that Ro Khanna said, imagine if politicians' campaign funds were in Silicon Valley Bank. Does anyone think we wouldn't have had more action and communication? We owe hardworking Americans, farm workers, employees worrying about rent, retirees, the same urgency about deposits that determine whether they get paid. And then if you notice here, you'll see it says this reply was hidden by the original tweet author. So the original tweet author would be Ro Khanna. And I want to show you the reply that they're referring to, because someone replied to Ro Khanna, and I'm going to show this on a bigger screen. It was BankU's not giving Elon $8 said this you with a question mark. And I'm going to show you what they were highlighting, because what they were pointing out is SVB trades, stock trades with Ro Khanna. Now, let me see if it'll let me. It may not let me make it bigger. Oh, it does. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's good. So I want you to see what you're looking at. Now, if you go to Capital Trades, and all you have to do is search Ro Khanna. Okay, let's click on Show Details. Trades 13,480. Issuers 1,232. Volume over 223 million. Last traded January 31st, 2023, District 17. Years active, 2017 to 2025. They even have his date of birth. So we know this is him. Now, if we look here at the top, it says politicians, Ro Khanna, SVB Financial Group. And by the way, if you hit this drop down, you can select different companies as well. But SVB Financial Group, let's scroll down. Here's a graph. And it shows you again the traded issuer. So you see, this is stock. This is SVB Financial Group stock. And this is under Ro Khanna. So the last time there was a trade was in January, which matches what it says here. Last traded January 31st, 2023. So the last time he traded was in January. Notice under type, it says buy. So you have the option to buy and you have the option to sell. And we can just scroll down. This isn't new. Look, January, December, November, October. And you can even click explore more trades. But I want to stay focused on this one. And let's go to this graph. SVB Financial Group. So you can see they actually had a pretty good run here when we get to this point here. But notice how it starts to look. Notice how it's starting to decrease. Boop. Right? So say whatever you want about me, but the data doesn't lie. So whether you like Ro Khanna or not, look at what the data is showing you. Now, we have pushed Ro Khanna about this before on Twitter. We asked him, why are you trading stocks? And Ro Khanna's response was, these are not his stocks. He said these belong to his wife, which she had before they got married. But according to Capital Trades, this is his name. This is his name. So either if that's true, why would someone else trade stocks under his name? It's his name. Joanna, that's sus. Why would he buy after months of selling? These are all good questions. These are all good questions. So again, I can't go by what Ro Khanna told me. I can go by the data. So what you tell me doesn't mean anything if the data is showing the opposite. So that goes back to what this gentleman or this person was saying here, this you. And that's the screenshot Whereas obviously he looked this up on a phone or mobile, SVB Financial Group. And again, January, February, December. It's a screenshot, so I can't click on it. But after I saw that screenshot, I said, let me look this up for myself because, just to make sure. And sure enough, there it is. So I don't know I don't know what else to say. Because again, this is the data. Data doesn't lie. He was on a Twitter space recently, saying the same thing. It's a recorded Twitter space saying that those are not his stocks, but it's under his name. So even if it wasn't him, it should have never been under his name to begin with. I just think this is suspect to me. This is suspect. And so here's my thing. A lot of people get on Nancy Pelosi about trading stocks, but Nancy Pelosi doesn't even lie about it, though. It's not like she says, no, that's not me. That's Paul. Ro Khanna says it's not him. It's under his name. And then we have to go back. We have to go back to this and we have to ask. Whoops, my cursor here. We have to ask, why did he hide the comment? If we go back here, again, thank you, Lachlan, for this. Thank you. Because this was Ro Khanna's tweet. And then it says the reply was hidden by the original tweet author. So again, if it's not you trading the stocks, why did you hide the comment that showed your name attached to the stocks? If this is not an issue, why did you hide it? I don't know. I don't know what else to say. And shout out to my friend. Thank you for sending me this. It just, again, anyone can look this up. Anyone can look up this information. BHF says Sabby is better investigator than Angela Lansbury. Well, shout out to my friend. My friend does a lot of financial research and sent me this. And I was just like, again, if there's nothing wrong with this information, then why did he hide it? Why did he hide the tweet? I don't know who's interviewing Ro Khanna next, but if you're seeing this, ask him about these stocks. Now, there's more with SVB because it's not even just about Ro Khanna. There's also this issue with Russia and Ukraine. And shout out to the person who sent me this as well. Examining market response to the Ukraine conflict. This was on their page. So this was posted. So the conflict meeting was February 28th of 2022. So this was last year. Listen to this. Make this bigger. The invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces cemented for investors that geopolitical risk has moved into the forefront in terms of market dynamics. While the threat of military action is cause for great concern from a geopolitical and social perspective, there is little historical evidence to indicate that the current conflict will have a significant negative impact on the equity markets over the long term. During this Monday's webinar, Chief Investment Officer, Private Bank Wealth Management, Shannon Sakosia, and John Longley, Head of Private Bank Wealth Trust and Wine, share their insights on the market during this trying time. And here are all the speakers here, or they show some of them. There's John and there's Shannon. And it's just, so did they have their hands in investing in the conflict with Russia and Ukraine? And is that why they tumbled? They're not talking about this on mainstream media. As many segments that I have watched about this SBF crisis. I haven't seen anybody mention this issue with Russia and Ukraine, and I didn't see anybody mention this issue with Ro Khanna's name being attached to SVB stocks. So that's that. Let's go on to some of the comments. I don't even know what to say at this point. I don't know what to say at this point, but do you see why? Do you see why if he had that urge to push, let's bail them out? Let's go on. Zach, thank you so much for the super chat. Ro Khanna looks like a mannequin in a Macy's. Yikes. Joe, OWS, this is why commercial banking and investment banking should not be allowed to merge, as they are gambling with your money. Thanks for the super chat. Colin, you said the average person won't look this up. Sadly, neither will mainstream media. They haven't said anything about this. Thank you for the super chat, Robert. Ro Khanna talks the talk, but never walks the walk. Look, I have gone over that stock information that I just shown you with multiple people just to make sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing. And they all confirmed it. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip, Roger. This bank been around since Lisa. I wonder if I can take you home. Was at the top of the charts yet. Friday was the first time I've ever heard of it. If this don't scare us into running CBIs for public banks, I don't know what will. Philly and San Francisco leading the way as they pass public bank legislation by veto-proof majorities, with LA coming up on the rear, while New York State, Massachusetts, Oregon, and Washington State just put out their own state legislation. Thanks for this tip as well. How many crashes do we have to go through until those living in CBI states start leading the way and show the rest of us in non-CBI states how it's done? California, Colorado, Arkansas. Is it Arkansas? Yeah, Arkansas. Arizona. I think it's Arizona. I think you mean AZ. Nebraska, the Dakotas, Missouri, Montana, Oklahoma, Oregon, Ohio, Michigan, Nevada, Florida, and Illinois all allow voters to use the CBI process to amend their state constitution. Let's not wait until it's too late and not waste too much time with the debate. I hear you. I hear you on that, Roger. This is just something else. I don't know what else to say. Mary says he doesn't want to be associated with the downturn. Robert, I'm going to post this video on all my Facebook groups when it lands. Thank you so much. Get this message out to as many people as possible. That's all I'm going to say, because this is a very telling moment. Like I said, if there was nothing wrong with that information, why did he hide the tweet? Okay. We are moving on to our case study, our progressive campaign case study. And I want to break this down in such a way. We're going to talk about the past, and we're going to talk about the present, and a little brief like glimpse into the future, so to speak. I've done little case studies on this show before. This one, I think, is probably going to go pretty deep because there's so much to show you. But I want to give a shout out to Do Dissidents, because it was actually their video that made me say, you know what? There's some things we need to show people. So I want to start with that. We're going to talk about why the progressive campaign strategy is problematic, why it's not working. This case study is not to shame people. I want to make that very clear, because I want people to be like, so-and-so, Sabby roasted so-and-so. That's not what this is about. This is to show you where we came from and why we have what we have today. And you have to understand that there is strategy. There's different types of strategy that you can do. But you have to understand why this particular strategy has pretty much split people on the left. And there's different elements that we're going to talk about here. And then you're going to understand, I'm going to explain to you the problem that people seem to have with Jimmy Dore splitting from that strategy. I'm going to explain. It's all going to make sense when we get done. But you also have to understand why some people are still pushing it. I want to say again, this is not to shame anybody, but I want to show you why we are where we are today and what could possibly happen for the future. So I want to start with this video here. It's a clip from Do Dissidents, and it says, progressive media desperate to recreate Bernie magic with Marianne 2024. Let's get started here because this actually starts the case study. And I'll chime in here and there, and then we're going to go to some other clips.
Progressive indie media ecosystem owes its existence pretty much to the Democratic primaries of 2016. Right, the Bernie Sanders campaign served as a red pill moment for progressive Democrats who all of a sudden, for the first time, saw their own party's true colors. And that just happened to happen as the podcast and YouTube world was becoming more mainstream and accessible to mass audiences. So it was really a perfect storm for podcasters and YouTubers. Now, the Bernie versus Hillary saga, in addition to providing this endless supply of emotionally charged content, also served as a sort of built-in narrative arc for shows like The Young Turks and Secular Talk, The Humanist Report, and others. And just as most successful TV series contain episodic stories within a sort of overarching plot, these lefty online programs covered each and every development of that campaign, the debates, the conventions, right, everything, as part of a larger story unfolding in real time, which of course ensured that their audience would keep coming back for more.
Let's pause there for just a second. Let's all remember, let's go back to Bernie 2016. These shows really grew significantly from the Bernie Sanders campaigns. And it just so happened that Bernie ran twice in a row. Now, that is not to shame these people. I want to make that very clear. But you have to understand why they're doing what they're doing today based on what happened before. This doesn't mean that they don't believe in the progressive strategy. It doesn't mean that they don't still want to fight inside the Democratic Party. But what it does show you is that during those two Bernie campaigns, these platforms grew quickly. And I don't mean you have 10,000 subs and then a year later you have 20,000. I mean, these platforms were able to grow to the point where they had over 100,000 subscribers within a year. I've talked to people that were a part of these shows that have explained this to me, how this worked. So it was that Bernie campaign twice in a row that really helped a lot of people find them. That's how I found some of them, to be honest. But then something happened. Let's go on.
And even as the primary ended, after the primary ended, these online creators were then further blessed with a very darkly comic and eventful general election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, followed by, of course, a Trump victory and then the Trump presidency, and then again, of course, by a second Bernie Sanders run. Now, since the election of Joe Biden, however, this progressive media hustle has become a far greater challenge than it ever was before. Now, this, to be clear, is not for a lack of material. From the Build Back Better debacle, the Russia-Ukraine war, Twitter files, the Republican forced to vote throwdown, and most recently, obviously, the disaster in East Palestine, Ohio. All of these events have given content creators an opportunity to sink their teeth into important and consequential stories and provide a sort of alternative indie media perspective.
But even those stories don't help you grow quickly the way that a campaign does. And so for those of us who started after Biden won, we were already dealing with a couple of things. We were dealing with heavy suppression. There was suppression before, but it increased over time. So for people who started during Bernie, like 2016, they didn't have to deal with the level of suppression that we have to deal with today. Some of you have told me this yourself. After you watch my show, you're recommended CNN or you're recommended MSNBC. Why? I'm not mainstream media. That didn't used to be the case. You used to be recommended another independent network. That doesn't happen anymore. So they pushed independent media down in the algorithm and they pushed corporate media up in the algorithm. So when there is a presidential campaign, and particularly someone as popular as Bernie Sanders was, if you were around during that time, you grew very quickly. And with that growth of having hundreds and thousands of subscribers, there's a lot of money to be made there. And this is why I say we always have to bring it back to the money. After Biden won in 2020, things started to change. You did not have Donald Trump there to give you more views. Trump was also very popular for mainstream media as well. He helped their ratings. So they also took a turn for the worse when Trump lost in 2020. Bernie Sanders was most likely not going to run again. And then on top of that, the squad had already proven to be a big disappointment. So if you were a part of that group during that time, where do you go and what do you do? Last year for you was probably a difficult year. You may have found yourself trying to defend Joe Biden in instances where he did not deserve to be defended, just so you can play with the algorithm. And that's what people have to understand. A lot of this boils down to money. A lot of it is not just about growth. It's about creating some type of wealth here. And it's also about something else that I'm going to mention that I don't think he mentions this in this clip, but I'm going to add on as well, because it's actually not just about money. Let me go on.
That you wouldn't find on cable TV or in mainstream newspapers, magazines, right? And so on. But presidential campaigns come with the unique benefit of more or less writing themselves, right? They provide that narrative arc, which makes the day-to-day duties of online commentators far easier than having to sort through dozens of different stories and research them and choose, okay, which one should we cover? Which one should we not cover?
This is the part I told you guys before as well, is that that's the hardest part for me. It's not finding stories. It's deciding which stories I'm going to cover out of these 20 stories I found for one day. That's the hardest part. Then you have to look up the articles. Then you got to read the articles. Then you have to try to find clips that actually make sense and just doesn't sound like a bunch of gibberish. Like, those things actually take time. But if you're mainly focusing on a presidential campaign, that doesn't take as much work, because all you have to do is follow them through the process. So if there is a debate, all you got to do is talk about that debate. If this person has had an interview recently, all you have to do is talk about that interview. You don't have to sit there and pick out all these different news stories. And that does make a big difference. And you will grow faster. I'm glad he mentioned that, because I think sometimes people think that we just jump on camera and there's not much to it. It takes time. It takes time to pick stories. It takes time to read all those articles. I usually read them twice sometimes. Like, it takes time to research the information.
How are we going to approach these topics, right? Elections are these sort of simple, straightforward, good versus evil narratives in which one hero character, your candidate, must overcome all these obstacles, beat the odds, and defeat the villainous opposition. These are the kind of popcorn movies, if you will, that audiences crave. And when they're done well, they're almost always box office gold. And so now, as the 2024 primary season begins, many in the online left media space are, for the first time ever, faced with a very grim reality of a presidential campaign season with no candidate to support, which means the story has no hero character. There's no Rocky Balboa in the ring. There's no Atticus Finch in the courtroom. And any screenwriting teacher would tell you that a script with no hero is a certain dud. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that professional YouTubers who made their bones in 2016 are aware of this looming disaster in which a presidential election cycle is going to come and go without the massive boost in engagement, subscriptions, and donations that usually comes with it, and comes with championing a candidate and confirming the biases, various biases of their most avid supporters. Now, it is for this reason, and this reason only, in my honest to God opinion, that so many of these pundits are so desperately trying to sell their followers on Marianne Williamson's 20.
There you go. That part right there. Because you have to find someone to replace the Bernie strategy. Bernie did it twice in a row. You have to bring in someone else to keep that going. And that's just reality. Now, this is not to say that Marianne didn't want to run. This is not to say that Marianne doesn't want to be president. But this is to say that there is money to be made there. And so you have to find somebody to fill that Bernie spot. The problem is the person that was found is not popular the way that Bernie Sanders was. Bernie Sanders, till this day, as much as I have a lot of criticism about him, he's still the most popular senator in DC. He still has a lot of support. So, it's somewhat of a reach if the pick is someone like Marianne who does not garner that same type of support. So you already know that there's no way that Marianne is going to win. So if you already know that there's no way that Marianne is going to win, then why are you trying to sell this on to people? Because even if Marianne loses, she still wins. Even if Marianne loses, the people who are pushing her, who are pushing to do the strategy, those people still win. They still make money off of it. And they also get access. And we're going to talk about that in just a second.
24 challenge to Joe Biden. Because despite her non-existent polling support as of last week, and only 4% polling support this week after being proposed by Morning Consult as the sole alternative to Joe Biden, many in the progressive media are pitching Marianne's campaign as a sort of blockbuster threequel to the two Bernie Sanders efforts in hopes of recreating that same magic, that same spike in viewership that came with the first two Sanders campaigns. Now, at first glance, this seems like a sort of more or less rational business proposition, albeit, I think, a very shallow and cynical one. But the more you think about it, the problem they're going to have is that by the third time around, and you can already see they're starting to have this problem, many in this space have already come to know how this particular movie ends, with dashed hopes, deflating defeat, and a reluctant, exasperated, blue no matter who endorsement from the candidate, which then fractures their coalition.
That is 100% correct. And even if it wasn't Marianne Williamson, anyone else put in this position doing that strategy would run into the same issues. He is correct when he says that there is money to be made there. People will grow. People will, just like before, like some people are probably going to reach over 1 million subscribers. But who will lose? The working class people will lose. I made a decision after Bernie 2020 and after the squad's failures that I was not going to tell working class people or any people to donate their money to candidates running in the two-party system. Not anyone. And we've received a lot of criticism for that. Those of us at RBN, people are really angry with us. We were saying this last year, and some of the same people who agreed with us when we said this last year, now that it's getting closer to 2024 and people are starting to announce a run, now some of those people are starting to turn and they're really angry with us, including some of the ones who have been on this show. And this is why I'm preparing you now. 2024, watch, next year is going to be even worse because people are starting to show their true colors. Now, we need to go back and we need to look at where this all came from to begin with. And we have to go back to TYT. TYT is where this really all started. And I want to show you some of the channels that you may not have been aware of that were a part of TYT, but are no longer affiliated. So they mentioned the TYT network. We know who they are right now. And then it goes into programs produced for the TYT network that are no longer in production. They mentioned those. Remember aggressive progressives, programs no longer produced or owned by the TYT network, but are still in production. This is the piece I want to focus on right here. The Rubin report, remember Dave Rubin left. David Pakman, and a lot of people don't know this. David Pakman was also a part of the TYT network. From 2005, he was affiliated with the TYT network from 2012 to 2015. We all know Jimmy Dore started with TYT. The Majority Report was also a part of TYT. Believe it or not, even the Breakfast Club, a lot of people don't know this, was also a part of TYT. That's with Charlemagne the God. And also Secular Talk, which was Kyle Kalinski's show. The reason why I'm showing you this is because when you look at this whole progressive movement, it's almost impossible, with the exception of those of us who started recently, it's almost impossible to find people that at some time or place were not connected to TYT back then. Why is that important for you to understand? Because it explains some of the talking points that they have even today. This also can tell you why we received criticism about our General Strike Summit, where some people told us we did not go through the proper channels. What were they referring to? They were referring to that TYT network umbrella, that the ideas should start with them first, or should be ran through them first, and then you move on and do what you want to do. We did not do it that way, and that bothered some people. Now, if you'll notice, out of all these people that were affiliated with TYT and no longer are, Jimmy Dore is the only one that still advocated for the progressive strategy after he left TYT, because Dave Rubin didn't. Dave Rubin's flipped completely, but woke up and said, no, this is a sham. The progressives aren't fighting for you. We can't do this. He's the only one that broke away, like really broke away. Secular Talk still supports it. Majority Report, like they still are doing that strategy. Jimmy Dore is the only one that completely broke away 100%. And that will let you understand one of the reasons why they have problems with Jimmy Dore. Now, this is not to say that Jimmy Dore is perfect, but I think we all know what's really going on here. Now, why do I bring this up? One of the things that Keaton mentioned in that video, he talked about the money, a lot of money to be made when you have that presidential campaign, but also especially when you have access to that candidate. That is very important for people to understand. If you have access to Marianne Williamson, in a sense, like others do, and I've interviewed Marianne, but I'm not on board with her campaign. But when you are on board with that, and you do have that type of access, that means you can get access to other politicians in DC that you may have not been able to get access to before. That means you might be able to interview members of the squad. And if you are a channel that has started this network where you said you're going to be a new mainstream and you're going to be a serious competitor, eventually it will get to the point where you will need to have access to politicians in DC. This is inevitable. So it's not just because people believe in Marianne. It's not just because people believe Joe Biden should be primary challenge. It's also because of money, and it's also because of access. And you have to understand that is very important. If you are trying to get to a TYT level, you are going to have access to politicians. And for the most part, the progressives or the squad members are not interviewing with independent media for the most part. They are not going on to Secular Talk, some of these same shows that championed for them and told people to donate to them and started the Justice Democrat strategy. They are ignoring those shows. So it's almost like you have to get back in good graces with them in order to get them on your show again. So we have to go back to the Justice Democrat launch. Now, this was, I just want to remind you, this was Humanist Report. This was 6 years ago. There's something here that is said that I want to point out, because it's not just about the presidential candidates. It's also about Justice Democrats, which also came in after Bernie 2016. This was another way to also make money. And that's not to say they didn't believe in these candidates. A lot of us believed in these candidates. But what you have to understand is there was also something in it for the people who started it. Listen to the launch, listen to the announcement, because there's something I want to highlight here.
The Young Turks and Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk have teamed up with veterans of Bernie Sanders' campaign to launch a new initiative to take over the Democratic Party once and for all. So it's called Justice Democrats, and this is something that I am overwhelmingly excited about. Now, the first question, before we even get to what Justice Democrats are, is why even bother with the Democratic Party? Because I talk about how the Democratic Party is a lost cause and how they're rotten to the core. So why not just start a new party? Why not take all of the resources that Justice Democrats can raise and funnel this towards creating a brand new party that we're in control of? Well, I'll let Kyle Kulinski explain why that might not be the best strategy.
And all of the institutional...
So now they're going to point out why they're not trying to create a third party. But there's another piece to this. Listen to this.
Biases against third parties are so immensely strong that we're effectively handicapping ourselves if we go into it trying to do a third party. It's like taking a sledgehammer, swinging it at your kneecap, and then saying, okay, now it's time to go run that marathon you spoke about. Well, if I'm going to run the marathon, I should be in tip-top shape now, shouldn't I? I should give myself the best possible chance, not the worst chance. So, for example, the Green Party, who I absolutely love, they've had some successes here and there, but by and large, they are not what's viewed as a viable third party. And again, it's not their fault. It's the fault of the institutional biases against them and against third parties in general.
Notice here how they mention the Green Party is not viable, but they're talking about on a national level. Notice how they leave out the fact that the Green Party actually has won on the local level. In fact, there's a lot of them that have won on the local level, but they didn't tell us that back then. This is something that would have been good to know. And even when you look at the strategy was to focus on the national level, not what you can get accomplished locally. This is also something that I feel like people should have known back then. But listen to the rest of it, because there's something that's mentioned here by Mike that I think some people may not have heard.
But if you're a member of the Green Party and you're a member of the Democratic Socialists, let me tell you right now, you are our allies. I view you as our allies. So I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I need them to understand exactly where we're coming from. And if you read the platform of the Justice Democrats, we specifically refer to reforms that we favor that would help third parties and remove some of those institutional biases. But based on our calculations...
Did you hear that part right there? Reforms that would help third parties. That never happened. And you know why that never happened? Because it's not profitable. I'm sorry, but we have to call it out. We have to call it for what it is. Third parties are not profitable. Independent candidates are not profitable unless you have someone running that's like a celebrity type figure. Like if you had a Jesse Ventura that was running on a national level. And I'm going to point out their principles as well. You're going to see this in their principles, where this was one of the things that Justice Democrats was supposed to do. And that never happened. So people were stuck and trapped in the Democratic Party.
Our highest chance of winning and actually getting the policies we want implemented is to take over the Democratic Party.
So in my opinion, I think Kyle's logic here is absolutely sound. And I've kind of made similar arguments here. I've stated that, yes, unfortunately, we have to begrudgingly work within the Democratic Party, but simultaneously try to build a viable third-party alternative, because...
That part right there. simultaneously build a third party alternative. That never happened. In fact, all of the focus and investment was in the Justice Democrats and that progressive strategy. It was Bernie Sanders and the Justice Democrats, because again, like I said, there's no money. It's not lucrative for you to try to do a third party movement. It's just not. But there was a lot of money to be made in Bernie Sanders' campaign. There was a lot of money to be made with this Justice Democrat strategy. Like I said, these two issues alone helped these platforms grow very quickly, and there was a lot of money that was made. So just like that, the third party part of this experiment, forget about it. We're not even going to try to implement it because the money's right here. I'll let him finish this bit and then I'll show you something else in reference to this.
Unfortunately, with our two-party system, with our single-member district plurality, winner-take-all system, it's really difficult for a third party to gain prominence in the United States currently. So I agree that it's easier to just try to take over the Democratic Party rather than trying to create a viable alternative. Now, I think that we should still try to build up the Green Party at the same time, but
build up the Green Party at the same time. And this, again, this never happened at all. So that being said, I want to show you what the principles actually were for Justice Democrats, because some people have seen this, some people have not. But I think it's important that you understand that that actually was one of the principles. This isn't just Mike's opinion. This was actually listed here. When you look at ideology and political issues, let's scroll down to the bullet points. Now, some of these I've already called out. That doesn't even happen. Ending arms sales to countries that violate human rights, such as Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt. They ain't been supporting that. There's a lot of these they have not done. They haven't done at all. Ending the practice of unilaterally waging war. But I want to get to the piece here where it talks about third party. Let me make sure I don't pass it, because I think here it is. Right here. Let me highlight this. Is it going to let me highlight it? Implementing instant runoff voting nationwide in an effort to make third party and independent candidates more viable. Implementing instant runoff voting nationwide in an effort to make third party and independent candidates more viable. That never happened. And that's why we don't have that third party movement. That's why the Green Party was not built up. That's why you got people like Howie Hawkins still around there. And this is why people got funneled back into the Democratic Party and they were told, just go ahead and vote for Hillary Clinton. Just go ahead and vote for Joe Biden. So that piece there is crucial. Had that piece been implemented, maybe we would have a candidate ready and prepared to run for a third party run for president or an independent run for president. But we never got there. And so now some of the same people that I just showed you that say it's stupid to even try third party, they weren't saying that then. And they're not telling you that this was a part of the strategy. It was just never implemented. So that's important to understand. So we move on to Bernie Sanders, Bernie 2016 run. Bernie Sanders was doing pretty well. Of course, he was cheated. And even though that happened, what did Bernie Sanders tell you to do? Let's take a look at it.
Immediately, right now, we have got to defeat Donald Trump. And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
booed. Do you see that? That is when Bernie Sanders told people to go ahead and vote for Hillary Clinton, and people are booing him. Now, that was the first time Bernie said to vote for his opponent. Again, funneling people back into the Democratic Party, telling people to vote for the same corrupt corporate establishment that he told them to fight against. And this has been a common tale where the progressive candidate runs, they lose, and they tell you to go ahead and vote for the corporate candidate. So Bernie Sanders had a lot of energy. He had a lot of people riled up and ready to fight and push back. And he took all of that energy and channeled it right back into the Democratic Party. That was the first time. People who did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton were shamed for supporting people like Jill Stein or for not voting at all. Those people were shamed. Those people were bullied. Those people were told that they're the reason why Trump won. And even when you do the math, that is not the case. Because if you do the math and you look at the votes that Jill Stein got, even if Hillary Clinton got her votes, Hillary Clinton still would have lost. Hillary Clinton lost on her own because she did not campaign in the Rust Belt. She didn't think those people were important. She thought she was a shoo-in. She thought she had it in the bag because she was backed by people like Goldman Sachs. So when you had people like Brianna Joy Gray who voted for Jill Stein, when you had people like that, again, those people were shamed. They were like, how dare you not support her? And the one common thing that both of these elections had in common is the fact that the common enemy was Donald Trump. And so they told you time and time again to vote for the corporate Democrat, even though that's not someone that has the same principles as you. But they told you to do it anyway, because otherwise you'll end up with Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. And then once Trump had been in office, then we were brought with that same fear again. 2020 comes around and Bernie Sanders runs against over 20 candidates for the Democrat primary. It comes down to Biden and Bernie Sanders. And I've talked about this before, where I felt like during that one-on-one debate that he had with Joe Biden, I do not feel like Bernie went as hard at Joe Biden as he could have. And you can do that just by going after his record heavily. And it almost said something to me as to though, like, it looks like Bernie's just given up here and has been told to let Joe just go ahead and be the nominee. Bernie Sanders told people to support Joe Biden before he even announced that he was dropping out of the race. And then not only that, but he also did this on CNN. So here we have Bernie Sanders again telling you to vote for his opponent. Listen to this.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country. In response to the unprecedented crises we face, we need an unprecedented response, a movement like never before of people who are prepared to stand up and fight for democracy and decency and against greed, oligarchy, and bigotry.
To fight against corporate greed and oligarchy and bigotry. But then who does he tell you to go ahead and vote for?
And we need Joe Biden as our next president. Let me take this opportunity to say a word to the millions of people who supported my campaign this year and in 2016. My friends, thank you for your trust, your support, and the love you showed Jane, me, and our family. Together, we have moved this country in a bold new direction, showing that all of us, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, native born and immigrant, yearn for a nation based on the principles of justice, love, and compassion. Our campaign ended several months ago, but our movement continues. And
it didn't. The movement did not continue. Here's where the problem lies. After Bernie Sanders lost in 2020, and by the way, his best shot was 2020, not 2016. Based on the numbers, his best shot was 2020. After he lost in 2020, even though he said our movement continues, Bernie Sanders publicly was simping for Joe Biden, saying that Joe Biden's doing a great job. Bernie Sanders had interviews with corporate media. He also interviewed with Crystal Ball and said that Joe Biden is doing a great job. Bernie Sanders abandoned his movement. So that was twice now that Bernie Sanders took that same energy and funneled it back into the Democratic Party. And so now all of the shows that were able to benefit off of the Bernie campaigns and the Justice Democrat strategy with the squad, they were kind of at a crossroad as to what do we do now? Because that's twice that Bernie has disappointed people and the squad has also disappointed people. They're not willing to push back. They're voting against legislation and voting for legislation that they're not supposed to based on the Justice Democrat principles. What do we do? And that's why you have to understand the push for Marianne is important to those people, not just because they think Joe Biden should be primaried, but because how do you keep this progressive energy moving if you don't have that person to run as the progressive candidate for president? If you don't have anyone to do it, the energy will go away. Now, there was one person who was not willing to budge. There was one person who said, this is ridiculous. They have sold out. They're frauds. And I'm not doing this anymore. But a couple of years ago, there were two people who were saying that, particularly on this interview here. One of them stood by their word. The other one did not. Now, this is Mike Figueredo with Jimmy Dore. This video was posted 5 years ago. Will progressives ever vote for Democrats again? Listen to this.
Perez and his bullshit warmed over corporatist agenda, which just got the Democratic Party wiped out from coast to coast. That's not happening. I'm not going to support a corporatist Democrat because Bernie Sanders stands next to him. In fact, Bernie Sanders told us a year ago that we shouldn't listen to him. That's what Bernie Sanders said. So how do you feel about this unity tour with the Democrats?
Yeah, if Bernie Sanders does something, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt more so than other politicians, but there's absolutely no way I can rationalize this because Bernie Sanders has repeatedly lambasted Democrats. He said they need to reform X, they need to reform Y, Z, but he's decided to imply that we should unify behind the Democratic Party before they've done anything to reform. And in fact, they just gave us the middle finger. They voted down a ban on lobbyist contributions the same day that Tom Perez became the new DNC chair. So they've done nothing to show to us that they are willing to embrace progressive reforms. And we see a couple of articles in Politico and The Hill about how, Dems are embracing Bernie now. That sounds great. Let's see it. I want to actually see some action. I don't want to hear about how they're embracing Bernie Sanders, because here's how it looks to me. They continue to trot out progressives like Keith Ellison, who, progressives already have some problems with him, but he's better than Tom Perez. We'll put it that way. They trot out Keith Ellison. They drag Bernie Sanders.
We'll pause there. There's another segment I want to get to as well in this video. This took place after Bernie lost to Hillary. Now, there's another piece here I want to go ahead and show you on that video as well. Eric, can you get it to that second timestamp? There's another piece I want to show you as well, because this is very, very revealing, very telling. How many people back then were ready to say, let's just walk away from the Democratic Party altogether? But you got to remember, the Humanist Report is a part of that TYT network. So even though he may have felt that way, doesn't mean the bosses felt that way. Do you see where I'm going with this? So the thing is this, the same person who has said some pretty nasty things to me on Twitter, then blocked me, and he blocks a lot of people, then blocked me for saying the same thing that he said back then. It is very telling what is happening here. Now, listen to this part here. Will you support them?
Fucking thing. So I have no idea what he thinks he's doing or what's going on. But if he doesn't leave the Democratic Party and do that draft Bernie Nick Brana thing, it's the Democrat. It's done. They're a dead fucking party. They are a dead party. Do you agree with that when I say that they're a dead party?
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing I want to mention.
Oh, absolutely. No hesitancy at all. Not hesitant at all. Oh, absolutely. Notice Jimmy was still the same. The same way Jimmy was talking right there, the same way Jimmy talked today. Notice he was still the same.
That the draft Bernie thing, because people, they kind of give me some pushback and they say, Mike, it's not going to happen. Here's the thing about that. Are the odds stacked against, a People's Party led by Bernie? Of course it is, but that's not the point. The point is that we have leverage, that Bernie Sanders has leverage. So he says, look, you see these millions of people, they're leaving the Democratic Party. They're joining my party now. Either you change or my party takes over. And this is what made Donald Trump successful in the Republican Party as an anti-establishment candidate. When it seemed as though the RNC and, Republican establishment people were trying to do shenanigans, what did Donald Trump do? He said, if you do this, I will be running as an independent and you lose. If Bernie Sanders did that, I think the DNC would have been less inclined to just brazenly rig the primary against him. So I want Bernie Sanders to have leverage. And by going on this unity tour, he's kind of putting up the white flag and is saying, you know what, I get it, Democrats, I have to surrender because you're the only chance we got. You're the opposition to Donald Trump. And that's true. They're the opposition party. We have no choice, so I surrender. That's what it feels like, and it's not a strategy when progressives desperately need leverage right now. We desperately need it.
Well, what?
Okay, let's pause here for just a second. So, someone changed. People were definitely bolder back then. Now, this gets to the point on the thumbnail where there's that split and you see Jimmy on the other side. Because Jimmy didn't back down. When Jimmy said, that's it, I'm not supporting them anymore, he stopped supporting them. He actually did it. Whereas others said, yeah, we should, no way, this is ridiculous. No, I wouldn't do that. But they still decided to do it anyway. And this is the reason why I think a lot of them have issues with Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy Dore actually did what he said he was going to do. They did not. Because he was able to see the writing on the wall. He was able to see, like, look, they are frauds. They're not going to change anything. It is what it is. So that's part of it. But then there was force the vote. And we have to remember what happened here. This is when I think the rest of them that hadn't split from Jimmy by that time decided to split from Jimmy when he called them out. When he called them the fraud squad. Because you see, the thing about the strategy is that they're totally fine with you if you call out Republicans. They're totally fine with you if you call out corporate Democrats. And even a little hesitant there in some ways, because some of them have defended Joe Biden where he should not have been defended at all. But the moment you criticize the so-called progressives, squad members, or Bernie Sanders, the moment you come after one of their own, then they see you as a problem. And Jimmy Dore was the first one
Because
to
I'm
do it.
sorry, but there's no excuse for the left not to have organized in the last few years to mount a challenge to Nancy Pelosi. You know she's hostile to you and your goals, and she has a 28% approval rating. She's less popular than Trump by far. What the F were you doing this entire time? I'll tell you what they were doing, Kyle. Nothing. They weren't doing anything. It was obvious they weren't doing anything. They weren't doing anything until a pothead comedian decided to bring it up a month before the speakership election.
Let's pause there about them not doing anything. Again, this is what I'm trying to tell you. He was the first one to really call them out, and he did so, you know, in an emotional way, which honestly, I don't blame him. I think some of us were really pissed that they weren't willing to do that, because that was a strategy from Democratic Socialists of America, and they weren't willing to do it. This right here was the breaking point for some people, because he decided to call them what they really were, which were frauds, and has been proven to be true. So do you see what I'm saying? This was the big split. Now, what does that have to do with this campaign strategy? If all of the large networks are not on board for progressive candidates, that not only can hurt the candidates, that hurts the entire strategy, that hurts the entire so-called movement. And it also hurts some of the channels that are telling you to do it. And then that hurts money. This is very important for people to understand. Keaton is 100% correct when he tells you how they grew because of Bernie Sanders, because of the squad. He's 100% correct. And if you are a network that is trying to be the next TYT or better than TYT, there's no doubt about it. At some point or another, you are going to have to interview politicians in DC. And that means that you need access. And if you tell your viewers not to support them, not to donate them, they'll still criticize them a little bit, but not to the point where they'll be blocked. If you tell that to your viewers, then you damn sure as well aren't going to get any kind of access to those politicians. Jimmy Dore obviously doesn't care to have that access to those politicians, but some people do. And that's what this is all about. So there were a couple of things that happened. There was Force the Vote. There was the Bernie campaigns where Bernie told you to go right back into the DNC. And then there were those that were bold enough to stand up and say, no, I'm not voting for Joe Biden in 2020. And one of those people was Brianna Joy Gray, and she was shamed for doing it. She was shamed for saying that. And she was shamed by one of their own, which was David Pakman. This is what happens when you don't follow the script. When you don't get on board with everybody else and they tell you, yes, you got to go ahead and vote for Joe Biden so we don't get Trump again. Then they turn on each other. Listen to this.
Controversy from the same interview with the Associated Press is that Bernie is being accused by some of attacking his own supporters because he sort of distanced himself from a woman named Brianna Joy Gray, who was his press secretary at one point in time. She posted on Twitter, quote, "With the utmost respect for Bernie Sanders, who is an incredible human being and a genuine inspiration, I don't endorse Joe Biden. I supported Bernie because he backed ideas like Medicare for all, canceling all student debt, and a wealth tax. Biden supports none of those." To me, this is just the epitome of a misguided comment, because, okay, Biden's not for Medicare for all, but he wants to expand it to 60 plus, which would give it to 20 million more people. Trump wants to kick 32 million people off of health insurance. Joe Biden just put out a plan for partial cancellation of some student debt. Trump, now is being forced into suspending some payments because of coronavirus, but Biden's better than Trump on that. On the wealth tax, okay, Biden doesn't support Warren or Bernie's wealth tax, but Biden's tax plan and capital gains taxing plan is way better than Donald Trump. So to me,
didn't Joe Biden continue some of Trump's tax policies? in reference to the healthcare comment. Does everybody have healthcare yet? Where is that? Where is that healthcare expansion that he is referring to? So do you see how he said her comment was misguided? Because see, this is what happens. Bernie Sanders lost. You got to vote for Joe Biden because he's still a Democrat. No, he's not Bernie, but at least it's the Democratic Party. And this is how they keep the cycle going. And anyone who split away from it and refuses to stay on course is shamed, is smeared, is ridiculed. And that's what they've done to Jimmy Dore. That's what they've done to us at RBN. I saw your comment here. She's black. This is why they hate RBN. Keep up the good work, RBN. Exactly. This is why they come after us. This is why people still come after Bree, even though she's on board for Marianne. They still come after her because she talks to both sides. Like, she has voted for a Green Party. She's voted for Jill Stein. She was Bernie Sanders' press secretary. She has found a way to find some middle ground, and she talks to people on both sides. So they still smear her too. But do you see how this goes nowhere? This gets you nowhere. I'll let him finish, and then I'll get you to the current problem that we have right now.
This is, missing the forest for the trees. But in any case, Bernie was asked about the comments from Brianna Joy Gray, and he did a sort of Brianna who kind of thing, telling the Associated Press simply, "She is my former press secretary, not on the payroll."
Go back to this part. I remember this. This was the comment from Bernie Sanders. So you see how he just turned on her like that? You see how he just turned on Bree like that? She is my former press secretary, not on the payroll. I remember when this happened. It's not like Bree said she wasn't going to vote for Bernie. She said she wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden. Why was Bernie so ticked off by that? Because Bernie Sanders was still operating for the same Democratic Party that he told you to be wary of. That's why. See how they do you? Now it leads us to where we are today with the issue with Marianne Williamson. And again, like I said, I've interviewed Marianne on the show before. But this issue right here in particular, they are going to ask Marianne if she will support Joe Biden. This goes back to the same issue with Bernie Sanders twice in a row when he told you he'd support Hillary, he'd support Biden, and he told you to do the same. So they're asking Marianne the same question. Listen to this.
So you're headed to South Carolina tonight.
Yes.
You'll be doing events tomorrow. Later this month, you're going to be meeting with the South Carolina Democratic Party Black Caucus. How do you feel about the primary schedule change? And how do you plan to connect with Black South Carolina voters who will be instrumental in how far you get? I mean, it was South Carolina Democratic primary voters who made Joe Biden president of the United States.
Indeed. So there are two questions that you've asked there. First has to do with the obvious rigging of this primary schedule. The DNC theoretically is supposed to stay neutral until a nominee has already been chosen.
So this is one of the problems that you run into, and Bernie Sanders ran into the same issue, that the DNC is not going to be fair to any progressive candidate. And this is just a fact of the matter. It's happened multiple times to Bernie Sanders. They're now doing it, although Joe Biden had already made this decision before Marianne announced that she was running. And I hear there are others that may be announcing as well. But you are in a system that is not designed to help you thrive and is damn sure not designed to help you actually win. And that is on purpose. And so to that, I tell people there is no need to give money again. Like, campaigns do cost money, but we already know the end of the story. We know the ending. We don't have to even watch the trailer. We know exactly how this movie ends and what is going to happen again then. So they're already doing it. This is what I said before. They already made South Carolina the first state. They have changed the rules in a way that makes it easier for Biden. So it's not just about Marianne, it's anybody else who steps into that position. They are going to come up against these same challenges. Let's go on.
But what happened here was a deliberate effort. They're not even covert about it anymore. They're very overt about it. Let's get rid of New Hampshire, since, as we know, New Hampshire did not do, Joe Biden did not do well in New Hampshire. New Hampshireites like progressive and independent candidates. So we get rid of New Hampshire. All this about diversity, when really, if it was just about diversity, we'd be putting Georgia in there. We'd be putting Michigan in there. Well, and we know that he does well in South Carolina. So the American people see this. The American people see this, Jonathan. The hypocrisy is unbelievable.
Oh, but come on. But the DNC has proposed, part of the new plan is putting Georgia into the primary schedule and twinning it with New Hampshire. So that criticism doesn't quite.
Yeah, but they're not putting Georgia first, though. They're putting South Carolina first. And that is the state that helped Joe Biden win. Like, his analysis is poor.
No, because they're still talking about poor diversity making South Carolina first. Now, South Carolina is an important state in the primary season, so I'm not denying that. But to say that this has nothing to do with the James Clyburn machinery, it has nothing to do with Jamie Harrison, these are ways that the larger democratic process is being stymied. This is not 100 years ago when men get to sit around a table smoking cigars, deciding who the nominee will be.
Okay.
But it is. And see, this is another part of the problem. It actually is. That is exactly what they do. Like, it still happens.
We've got less than a minute left, and I'm going to squeeze in two more questions.
I thought we were going to talk about black people in South Carolina.
Well, we were just a minute ago, but okay. So you're running against a sitting president, which is a daunting task.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are thinking, what's she going to do if she's not successful? Will you support the Democratic nominee? Will you support the party if you are not the nominee?
I'm going to do everything possible as a patriotic American to make sure that the neo-fascist authoritarian threat that is very real in our country and is very entrenched at this point within the Republican Party does not win the White House in 2024. That's why I'm running. I do not believe that the offering of an agenda where basically the message is the economy is doing well will beat the Democrats in 2024. So I think it's the question is reversed. How are we going to win the presidency in 2024? We are going to offer to the American people genuine economic reform and not just helping you survive what is essentially an unjust system. That's why I'm running.
So that is a yes. When they run for office, they have to pledge whether or not they will support the other candidate. They have to pledge that. Bernie Sanders made that pledge to support Hillary Clinton at the very beginning of his campaign. I didn't find that out until like last year. But if I knew that at that time, I would have never donated money to Bernie Sanders. They have to make a pledge. So here we are again, where no yes, no, no. You have to go in full force here. You cannot give a roundabout answer to the question. It's a yes or no. Are you going to support Joe Biden? If someone were to ask me that question, I'd say no. That's simple. That's simple. So to me, that means yes. And that means we have a Bernie Sanders pattern again, where the progressive candidate runs and then they tell you to endorse the corporate candidate, the corporate people that they told you to fight against. And the cycle continues. And then the next 2 years, another set of progressives will run for Congress, and then they'll be endorsed and pushed up by the same people. And then the 2 years after that, let's see who else we can get to run as a progressive for president. And then they'll be endorsed. And it is a constant machine. So you have to understand that at the end of the day, all of this is about money and it's about access. Because you make a lot more money backing presidential campaigns than you do doing what I do. There's not as much money to be made for me to tell you to leave both parties. Just keeping it real. There's not as much money to be made for me to tell you to support mutual aid, to support direct action, for me to tell you go participate in workers strike back. There's not much money in that. I was just at workers strike back yesterday. Good turnout. Those videos should post tomorrow. But that's what it's about, you guys. Let's be real. It is not lucrative to push third-party candidates. It is not lucrative to push independent candidates. It is not lucrative to tell people to do mutual aid, to tell people to do direct action. Those things don't make money. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. And if people don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like what I'm saying here, but I'm being 100% honest with you. If there was no money involved, it wouldn't be done. And when this is all over and Marianne loses and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he's got an exploratory committee as well, so he may also run. When all these people lose, if Joe Biden runs, at the end of the day, they still win because they get to write books, they get more speaking engagements. When all of these people lose, trying to do this progressive strategy, all of the hosts that tell you to support them and to get on board with them, they also win because it helps them grow again significantly. Maybe not as much as Bernie did, but it helps them grow again significantly, and it helps them make a lot of money. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day. I'm sorry, but I'm not here to sugarcoat things for you. I'm not here to tell you things that are going to give you warm, bubbly feelings. I'm here to cut right through it, cut right through the BS and just give you the facts. If there was no money to be made, it would not be happening. Period. I'll go ahead and do you guys want to do call in? I thought I had a meeting at 7, but it looks like the meeting. Okay, looks like we're not having that meeting after all. Looks like the meeting has been canceled. Do you want to do call in? If so, I could create the room. If not, that's fine with me as well. Either way, let me know. I'll wait for some of the responses here. But in the meantime, if you haven't had a chance to do so, please go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, I see one call in. Please call in Papa and Jose. Okay, yes. All right, so here's what I'm about to do. I have super chats to read. And Eric, are you there? I will need to take just like at least a 5-minute break before call in because sorry, I have to make sure the food's not outside and also have to make sure that I have to set up the room for call in. Okay. Let me make sure Eric's there because I have to. Okay, yeah, he is there. Okay. All right, yeah, I'm just going to take a quick break. Eric, I think we still have the super chats to read, and there's a chat on Rockfin, I think. Okay.
Is this mic working right?
Yeah.
Does it sound good?
Call in room while you're doing that.
Let's see. Test. Wait, this mic ain't working right. I don't think I'm coming through. Wait, is it?
We can hear you.
Okay, you got it. All right, good.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about the mic. Sometimes this thing will do this thing where it tells me the mic is disconnected, and I'm like, can they hear me? All right, I'm good. So, all right, how's everybody doing on this fine Sunday? This is where we give our Sabrina a little break, and then we'll be jumping over to call in. We'll get you that link soon, where you can everybody, where you can either bring up Callin in your browser, or you can put the app on your smartphone, and you can also get in it pretty easily if you just get into Callin one way or the other and just put in Sabs. It'll come right up. And the room may or may not be set up yet, but we'll get there. All right, let's see. Yeah, let me clear off this or change this banner. 2 Colin show starting soon. Yeah, make sure you hit that like button if you haven't already. That's the thing with the like button. Like, obviously, if you already hit it, you don't want to hit it again, because then it becomes an unlike. And oh wait, I'm hitting the wrong banner. Let me clear off. Where is it? There we go. All right, now we got our banners right. So, of course, if you hit the like button when you've already hit it, then you end up unliking it. So, like somebody put in a funny thing, make sure you hit the like button an odd number of times. Anyways, if you haven't hit the like button, hit the like. Let's see what we got. That was from Edward. Sabby, why don't you have Khanna on your show explaining why he deleted the original tweet of having his name on the stock? Yeah, I mean, I think Sabrina would be happy to have Ro on any time, but she gives him kind of a hard time. So I don't think Khanna's eager to come back on and face Sabby's questioning again. He gets a lot easier time on the corporate media and on some of these other shows where he can just do his little laugh and say his spiel. From Colin, my network, INN, started fall of 2021, and we are heavily suppressed. Yeah, make sure you're all checking out Independent News Network with people like Colin and Reef doing their show, and of course the great Indie Left, who does so much good work. And of course, they have a whole great crew over there doing shows at the old INN, Independent News Network. So I definitely suggest you check them out. This is from She's Black. MW, Marianne Williamson is ready to turn over the info from her supporters to the DNC, just like Bernie did. Oh yeah, she probably has already. She's, a Democrat, and they're probably sharing their list and their donor list and even their money, probably. Yeah, I mean, Marianne Williamson, she's clearly a sideshow in all this, just meant to take away some of that progressive lefty energy. From Laugh 66, thank you for the super chat. Work together. Great to see you promoting another great channel, Sabby. Do Dissidents is good. Anybody here get there also? Thanks, Sabby. Yeah, I like what I've seen of Do Dissidents. They got good takes. They seem to be a pretty new channel. And, we definitely, one thing I like to say is we should be, collaborative and generous with all comrades in this space if people are operating in good faith, and save our anger and our disgust for the powerful and for the billionaires and for their servants, our so-called representatives. They're the ones to be calling out and to be getting angry with. Thanks for this super chat, Vicky Blair. Sabby, did you hear Shmerkonis yesterday talk about the sore loser laws in certain states that prevent a dirty break? Yeah, I don't know if she saw that, but we'll make a note of it. And I know what you're talking about, how they'll do these laws where they say that if you run in the primary, then you're actually not allowed to run in the general election. And to me, that should be almost unconstitutional, because if you're what business is it of the state or the government, whether or not you ran in a primary? I feel like these primaries shouldn't even be a thing. Primaries should just not exist. If parties want to be parties and do their stuff over there and have their little caucuses and figure out who they endorse, fine. They can go do that over there. But for election day, for the official government election, they should not be using our polling centers. They should, those are private entities. The election should be simply a ranked choice, single day election of candidates, and the party shouldn't even matter. That to me is the kind of election system we need to get to, something like that. Thank you very much for the super chat, Colin. This is why Breaking Points is dangerous. They are in DC and have access to politicians in a way that TYT doesn't. That's why Ryan Grimm is there. Yeah, good point, Mr. Colin. Thank you. And thanks for the super chat, Steve. Remember when the reporter asked Bernie if Biden could beat Trump? He said, I do think Biden could beat Trump. That's when he lost me. Yeah, or at least Bernie should have said, maybe, but I'm the one who can really beat Trump, would have been the response if you're a real candidate, right? Thank you for the super chat, Elizabeth. Women in my community heavily involved with the Democrats labeled other women like myself who supported Bernie as misogynistic. So wrong. Yeah, definitely true there. Thanks for that, Elizabeth. And thank you for this super chat, Esoteric Teachings. What everyone is missing is that Bernie rigged the election against himself and he Russiagates himself. Bernie is the Democratic establishment. Can't argue with you there. He's definitely a tool. He's an institutionalist when it comes down to it, and just a player in the game, as someone we won't talk about said once. Thanks for this from She's Black. This is why they hate RBN. Keep up the good work, RBN. Yes. And thank you for this super chat. Lap66. Excuse me. My girlfriend wants to know how Sabby has such beautiful bangs. Is she going to show how? Thanks for the facts, though. And thanks for that super chat, Lab. I have no information on that topic. And we actually have some of the Rockfins. Do you want me to read them, or do you want to read them?
I can go ahead and read them. That was a funny one.
People want to know. All right, we'll see you later.
All right. Thank you for the tip, Roger. What takes years, sometimes decades to build, takes only moments to destroy. Third parties had 100+ years to become a viable threat and have gotten nowhere yet. They're still building. It's faster just to destroy and dismantle. It's all down the entire partisan system than to build a new party. These mofos are still building, Sabby. This is insanity. I mean, those are really good points there. Thanks for this as well, Roger. National parties can't exist without existing at state level. Time to start pushing CBIs as amendments to make existing of parties unconstitutional. If we can't get none, then no one can. If we can't get in the party, then we burn the house down with everyone in it. Metaphors, not to be taken literally. Vote blue no matter who you vote for. Me, Stein. Vote blue no matter who. You're responsible for Dawn. Me, who won New York again? Good points there, Roger. Let's not forget it wasn't just people had wasted their money, but they risked their lives to come out and vote for him. Remember, the pandemic was going on. Screw my $30. That's my life you're messing with. I was watching another video. Don't know if you had the chance to check it out, but she had a justice platform for everyone except for reparations for freedmen. Someone must have seen his vid, then she added it. Yeah, I did see that. He's talking about Marianne there, that they had forgotten to put reparations on there for African-American descendants of slavery, but they had put reparations on the website for Native Americans. But after that video, it looks like they made that change. So what we do online actually does matter. There are people paying attention to that. That's the point to make there. Now we are going to go ahead and do call in. So I want to go ahead and show you that we're almost at episode 100, believe it or not. This is crazy. I don't feel like I've done this many call-in episodes. But tonight on call-in, episode 89, Progressive Campaign Case Study. Okay, let's talk about it. That's all I wrote there. Okay, let's talk about it. We can get into that. We can talk about this issue with Khanna and SVB as well. I will see you guys over there. The call-in link is pinned to the top of the chat. You can use the app, or you can actually log in on your computer. They have it both ways, and you can call in from your computer just by simply using that link. So I am off tomorrow, guys. You know I'm not here on Mondays. I'll be back on Tuesday. Other than that, guys, see you over at Call In. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.